story of his life, because they were all based on real people that he had known. And one of them, the one I do this quite often because it's the only one I can remember because my memory's poor now, but Mrs. Gamp comes from Martin Chuzzle, which was one of his earlier books. I think 1849. He'd been to America and he wrote Martin Chuzzle when he came back from America. And Mrs. Gamp is a drunken midwife. And what you have to know is that in Victorian times, midwives were both deliverers of babies and layers out of corpses. They had two jobs, which they don't now, but they did then. And when the summons came to knock on the door, they did not know which one they were going to have to do, which job they were called upon to perform. So this is a moment when there's a knock at Mrs. Gamp's door. She said, "I'm coming! Is it Mrs. Perkins?" "Oh, Mr. Wilkes, don't say it's you, Mr. Wilkes. And that poor Mrs. Wilkes, we're not even a pincushion ready. Don't say it's you, Mr. Wilkes." So the gentleman's dead then, sir. More's the pity. But it's what we all must come to. It's as certain as being born, except that we can't make our calculations as exact. Poor dear. When Gamp was summoned to his long home, and I seen him a-lying in the hospital with a penny piece on each eye and his wooden leg under his left arm. I thought I should have fainted away. I bore up. If it weren't for the nerve, a little sip of liquor gives me, I could never go through with what I sometimes have to do. As I said to my friend Mrs. Harris, at the very last case that ever I acted in, which it was but a young person, "Mrs. Harris," I says, "leave the bottle on the chimney, please, and don't ask me to take none. But let me put my lips to it when I'm so disposed, and I will do everything I've been engaged to do according to the best of my ability." It's the most brilliant creation of his. And he could do comedy and tragedy equally skillfully. And he created over 2,000 characters. That's an incredible piece of invention. And they are all crisp and clear and shoot out at you from the page. You will probably know, I hope, Great Expectations. And hello, do you want to join in? You probably didn't know this was going to happen, did you?
Sorry?
Did you know there was going to be a reading?
I did actually.
Well, I'm afraid you have to pay. It's for charity. 6 quid.
I've only got a card though. Is that
That's fine.
Do it at the end.
But don't forget. So,
Great expectations.
yes, no, I haven't got one to Great Expectations, but you all people remember Miss Havisham.
Havisham is my favourite.
It's a real,
She's a bit foul.
an iconic character. And I wish I could remember the bit of Miss Havisham that I did in my play. But I hadn't prepared it, so I can't. But there is a poignancy and a tragedy about her, which is just so extraordinary. So please go back and read Dickens. More important than my book. He is one of the joys of English literature, and that is a great joy. In my book, I tell the story of when I told the Queen about English literature. She didn't like that at all. Yes, she was awful. This bit, I'll just open this at this page, and I did a play called The White Devil. It's a revenge tragedy by John Webster, and it was in 1976 at the Old Vic, which is a wonderful theatre of great tradition. And Glenda was at the height of her powers, a very strong English actress, a socialist, like me. She became actually a socialist MP after she left the business for a while. And I remember sitting next to the wonderful speaker, ex-lady speaker of the House of Commons. What was her name? You remember? Betty Boothwood, yes. What a wonderful lady. And she said to me, "Do you know Glenda Jackson?" And I said, "Yes, I do actually." She said, "Could you tell her to dress better?" She comes into the House of Commons. She comes into the House looking like a drowned rat. Well, I'm not known for my sartorial excellence, I can tell you. But it was just funny to think. Anyway, many years earlier, this was one of my experiences in The White Devil. The rehearsal room at the Old Vic is right at the top of the building. It has a glass roof, and in 1976, it was the hottest summer on record. Everyone boiled. We poured with sweat all day. The physical discomfort was intense. Somehow that spilled over into the rehearsal process. One of the actors remembers Glenda buying everyone ice creams and lollies to counteract the extreme heat we were suffering. Maybe she missed me out on her run to the ice cream van. There was bad feeling from the beginning. The mood was unpleasant, and rivalry and discord amongst the cast members sporadically bubbled over little moments of irritation and nastiness. Jonathan Pryce was particularly combative and scornful if anyone made mistakes. He patrolled the set like a shark, eating up errors from other cast members. Although Tom Chadbourne remembers Jonathan being larky and fun, enjoying one of the longest corpses, which in the business means laughing so much on stage that you can't speak your lines, that he never experienced. The cast contained many strong and gifted actors, but there was a collision of acting styles. Some had come from the Bill Gaskell Royal Court tradition, others from the Peter Hall Royal Shakespeare Company way of doing things. I also sensed a rivalry among the younger men vying for Glenda's attention. Jonathan Pryce and Jack Sheppard were openly contemptuous of James Villiers, a gentleman of the old school with perfect manners and a plummy, posh speaking voice. James refused to battle for a place on the stage. He felt it would be beneath him to push himself forward. He fell for Glenda in a big way. He was always susceptible to female charms and couldn't resist buying her a pair of flared jeans one day. His then wife, Patricia Donovan, was my dresser. It didn't help that I was nervous of Glenda Jackson, a star actress with a formidable reputation. My impression was that she liked people to be frightened of her. At the best of times, Glenda has little patience and no humility. She doesn't suffer fools gladly. I admit I behaved foolishly, and I was certainly made to suffer later as a She was horrid to me. I didn't like her, but I acknowledged her considerable gifts. She has given great performances. Occasionally she hits those heights, but she didn't in The White Devil. I believe she knew she was rubbish, which made her even worse. Although it wasn't just her, everybody involved behaved badly. The White Devil contains incest and murder and cruelty expressed in magnificent poetry. And Michael, our director, Lindsay Hall, was all at sea. His production wandered between various epochs. It was neither a costume drama nor was it a contemporary reimagining. There was no focus or particularity to it, because although we were dressed in modern clothes and smoking cigarettes, we carried old-fashioned pistols and Jacobean swords. Even getting onto the stage was hard. There was a revolving door on the stage left, resembling a New York hotel entrance. It's easy to get stuck in a revolving door, especially when carrying a sword. It seems for some time in other productions Michael had wanted to use revolving doors, so now he took his chance. It's never a good idea to take a production out of its location or period. A play is set in a time and a place for a reason. Occasionally it can work. Baz Luhrmann's film of Romeo and Juliet is an example. But this was a mishmash, a hideous hodgepodge of absurdity, and we knew it. I remember Patrick McGee getting so infuriated at just how awful it was that he slammed his hand into the brick wall of the rehearsal room, tearing it badly on a nail, and having to end up going to hospital. The rehearsals rapidly became acrimonious. There was no generosity, no sense of collaboration or accommodation in the cast, just competition and ranting. There were fights. They weren't rehearsals. Every day was like that. Nobody wanted to come into work. Glenda may have thought she was giving a good performance, but no one else did. She and I had a falling out. I cannot remember what it was about. I called her a cow, and she called me an amateur. I think she won that. It became ever clearer that we were in the middle of disaster. On the day of the opening night, Glenda called an impromptu meeting with the girls. All the women's dressing rooms were on one side of the stage, and the male dressing rooms were on the other. Once we were gathered in Glenda's dressing room, she said, "Look, I don't want to open the show tonight. I don't think it's ready. And if we open when it's not ready, we're not doing ourselves a favour. Do you all agree?" We did. All the women were keen to delay. All the men wanted to go ahead. Jack Shepherd summed up the male view. "This putting off is not a good idea. I want to get it under my belt." His part was huge, as Flaminio drives the plot, and he saw the attempted postponement as a female conspiracy. He was anxious to do the play, psychologically ready to tackle it. It was put to a vote, and Mike, our director, determined not to upset Glenda, made the casting vote ruling to cancel. I was the equity deputy, equivalent to shop steward, on the production. So Michael told me to go to Andy Phillips, the lighting designer, and one of the producers, who happened to be Glenda's boyfriend, and tell him about the company vote. The wheels were set in motion for the cancellation of the performance. Boards were placed outside the theatre and the press was informed. We were all devastated. Not just about the first night, but at the open division in the company, which the voting procedure had exacerbated. A small, disconsolate group of women went to La Barca, a local Italian restaurant, to have supper. When Jack Shepherd walked in and saw me, he said loudly, "You cunt." The whole restaurant went silent. I was shocked, not by the word, but by the venom in his voice. At the time, I was terribly upset. I'd always liked Jack. We'd had previously great success in The Girls of Slender Means. Now I realized it came from his frustration and misery at the moment at having the final moment of resolution removed, as he saw it, unfair. It was a coitus interruptus. You know how nasty men can be when that happens. The next night we opened. During the curtain calls, we were taking our vows. Andre Previn, who was in the audience, got up and shouted, "Rubbish!" That shows you how awful it was.